How do we make rest a priority in life? In today's lesson, and using insights from my master's thesis, we will consider how God's creation rest enabled the Israelites to observe the Sabbath in order to rest and give honor to Him. Today's key verse reads, "It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day He rested and was refreshed." Exodus chapter 31, verse 17. In Exodus chapter 5, verses 1 through 9, Moses and Aaron put the Lord's command, "Let my people go, so that they may celebrate a festival to me," against the Pharaoh's command, "Let heavier work be laid on them. Then they will labor at it and pay no attention to deceptive words." God sees people called to depend on, glorify, and enjoy Him in holiness and wholeness. But Pharaoh assesses resources to be dominated and put to work. Patrick Miller concludes that Pharaoh's obscuring of God's purposes is what triggered the Lord's gift of the Sabbath. What is required is what is needed to make and to keep human life human, and not inhumane, as it was in Egypt. This helpfully clarifies what it means to observe God's liberation. On the Sabbath, God stops the human life defined in commodification and slavery, and restarts the human life defined in His holiness and wholeness. The idea of God completing creation by accomplishing rest agrees with the ancient rabbis' belief that God actually created something on the seventh day. Jewish theologian Abraham Heschel explains that Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 through 3 is describing God's creation of Manucha, as if the universe was somehow incomplete without it. Quoting a midrash by Rashi, "What was created on the seventh day? Tranquility, serenity, peace, and repose." To the biblical mind, Manucha is the same as happiness and stillness, as peace and harmony. This means that the rest God accomplishes on the seventh day is not limited to a passive action at the beginning of creation. Instead, God establishes a time for tranquility in the beginning that flows through God's ongoing activity and deposits into God's end-time renewal. Manucha describes the power and harmony of Sabbath time in human time. This is where humanity is open to God, breathing holiness and wholeness into their earthly habits. So this rest that God accomplishes is an explicit and implicit beginning rest, because it originates in the special act of God completing and blessing creation, while also inaugurating the actual experience of rest in time. God's beginning rest is not just the stoppage of work activity, and extends even further than the creation of a dimension of tranquility and repose. The Bible depicts God actually experiencing the Menucha He created. Exodus 31, verses 12 through 18 is a review of Sabbath law immediately following the instructions for building the tabernacle. In verse 17, what the NRSV translates as refreshed is actually the Hebrew nafash, which means to take breath. In the context of Exodus 31, this verse teaches the Israelites that God taking time for refreshment in the 7 days of creation enables their refreshment, even in the process of building God's space on earth. In this way, God sets boundaries for human work with His own time of refreshment. God's time of rest also protects the goodness of work. Here's our lesson. The Sabbath was required in the fourth commandment. This connected it with the rest God took on the seventh day of creation. The Sabbath is a time to remember what God has done, but many people have great difficulty taking the time for rest and renewal today. Many adults work multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Others work non-stop to get ahead in life so they can provide things for their children maybe they've never had a chance to experience. Understanding these realities, it is good for us to heed God's command to rest and trust that He will bless us beyond our own ability and effort. Most modern-day practicing Jews still observe the Sabbath as a day of rest, while for most Christians, the Sabbath day is connected to Sunday, the day Jesus was resurrected. As participants in the new covenant, Jesus is our Sabbath rest.